Alright, we're back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering some more free agency developments in between a few that came last week, as well as some that have recently come in, up to just before I started recording this. To get straight into it, the Steelers signed Darnell Savage Jr. to a 1-year, $1.48 million deal. This is solely just to add more depth for them at that position, although between them getting Kyle Duggar last offseason, picking him up on a short-term deal, and also Darnell Savage Jr., you're getting a little bit older at that position. And in Savage Jr.'s case, while he can be a solid depth piece, some of the latest teams he'd been on up to this point have just relied on him to do far more than he's truly expected to at this point. He's 28 years old, so, he's still probably got a few good years of service left. But, I don't know. Last year was just rather strange for the man. Obviously, after being in Jacksonville in 2024, he rotated mightily last year between the Bills, the Jaguars again, and then also the Commanders for most of the season. Of course, we thought that would be a good hometown fit. And, well, let's just say that teams made it their mission when he was on the field to go right at him in man coverage because he was just much weaker in that regard. Like, at the very least, with Darnell Savage Jr., you were getting somebody who would consistently hold it down in coverage and who could tackle pretty well for his position. Now, of course, being further away from the play as a free safety primarily for most of his career up to that point, it's going to be hard for him to really get involved. But 18 tackles across all of those games, 12, and with 3 different teams. It felt like as he kept on seeing the field, the trust to have him out there in the first place, as well as the production when he was out there sparingly, seemed to diminish week by week. This is a man who, honestly, since 2021, and it could be cherry-picked a little bit, but he has just garnered less attention on the defensive end overall. And, he'd been fairly healthy. He's appeared in at least more than 10 games for every season of his career, so he's mostly available. That isn't the issue. But this snap percentage last season, he went all the way down from 83 in 2024 of defensive snaps to 47, 36, and then 33 with the Commanders through 8 games. So, while it could be an okay move, considering the Steelers are still trying to mitigate the injury with Deshaun Elliott at this point, he's probably going to miss far more time as we get into the new season. But I can't envision Darnell Savage Jr. going through something like that and being able to regain that sort of trust, regardless of who may be coaching up his unit at that point. We'll see. It's not out of the realm of possibility, especially with a team as vaunted as the Steelers' defense was and was expected to be, given that they had the highest payroll in the league on that side of the ball. You're going to be left to make these kinds of cheaper deals elsewhere. With them extending Cam Heyward to another contract, you're still paying TJ Watt. And I believe that Alex Highsmith is also either possessing a deal or very much on the verge of a deal, considering what he's been able to do for them since being on the team. Yeah, he signed a 4-year, $68 million extension in 2023. So that's decision time as well, if this is potentially the final year of that contract. There's a lot to consider there. So I guess it's okay, but I don't know if it really moves the needle a ton for this Pittsburgh team. The Commanders would sign Chigoziem Okonkwo to a 3-year deal. And honestly, it checks out for the Commanders at this point. Because with everything that transpired last season, they left themselves no choice whatsoever. As I said in that moment, the fact that they had Zach Ertz suffer that kind of injury as he was going through the course of rejuvenating his career after a season in which he'd been Jayden Daniels' safety valve, premier target in those situations, and had a stellar performance. He goes out early with an ACL tear and damn near a clean break of the leg with the way he got hit over the middle trying to catch that hospital pass. They just absolutely fucked that man up. And I still don't like how that shit went down. Truly. But they can't reverse it. It is their reality now. More than likely, Zach Ertz is going to miss majority of the year, and he may even choose to retire, which is unfortunate because with how he had been performing, it still looked as though he had a little bit more in the tank to provide this Commanders team. And when you look at their other options, between Ben Sinnott and Colson Yankov, both of them lean to be blocking tight ends. Zach Ertz could give you a little bit of everything, but he was, of course, stronger as a vertical threat down the field and just being able to exploit those soft zones to pick up easy receptions and easy first downs. You're missing that kind of element and that kind of threat with those other two tight ends. And with them still being on the roster, they had to find a way to get another person in there who could at least supplement that with being a threat down the field themselves. They don't need to come in and be the greatest blocker because you already have that kind of responsibility on those two guys right there. And with some of these other tight ends, like a Dallas Goedert, for example, already being off the market, there might not have been many better options than Chigoziem Okonkwo in this situation. I think it's a perfect storm for him. As long as Ertz is out, you're going to automatically come in and be the number one guy at that position. And it's a bit of a homecoming for him because he attended college at Maryland. So, you're back in the DMV area. He's going to have an understanding of where he's at. That always matters. And that could motivate him, a change of scenery with a Commanders team that, when healthy, they're going to have some questions to answer. Y'all were expecting me to say, they're going to be contenders. Because, in all honesty, that's what we saw with Jayden Daniels in his rookie season. But, of course, through all of the freakish injuries that they suffered, along with maybe a little bit of regression, they just completely crumbled and faltered last season. So now you have a bit of a mixed bag you're working with. And this year, upcoming, is going to be pivotal for defining the true direction that this team wants to go in. To get Chigoziem Okonkwo on a deal that ain't even really all that expensive. And with him coming from such a terrible situation, yet still doing good enough to last through it all, that could help this Commanders team a lot. Truly. Okonkwo had consistently been holding it down in Tennessee, but last year saw an interesting sort of shift in that. Now, he did have a career high in receiving yards and receptions with 56 receptions and 560 yards. So, coming out of that situation with as terrible as that Titans team was and still finding a way to lead them in that regard is definitely something to take into account. But you also have to understand that Gunnar Henderson in the same junction took away some of those reps. And I don't really know what that may come down to. Were the Titans just always trying to run a 2 tight end system? Did they believe that Gunnar Helm had more upside to his game than Chigoziem Okonkwo at that point? Maybe they don't move on from Chigoziem Okonkwo so willingly if they didn't have Gunnar Helm doing what he did as a rookie for them last season. Who knows? But either way you slice that, the Titans were as dysfunctional as it gets. And the Commanders have their own things to sort out. But that could do so much for Chigoziem Okonkwo if they actually go out there and compete to the best of their ability, contend fairly well, and get themselves in the conversation of being one of the best teams in the NFC. It's a lot to ask. It's a lot to take on. But that is something that is most certainly possible. It's not just completely asinine to say something like that. He also had 2 touchdown catches on the year. Now, in this offense, particularly, it's tricky because Terry McLaurin is still going to be your number 1 wide receiver. I think that's a given. That is not up for debate whatsoever. But then it's like, okay, you're adding Chigoziem Okonkwo to the mix. Who is that secondary wide receiver going to be for them? Do they look elsewhere for it? Do they try to make a move in free agency? Do they try to get a potential number 2 guy through the draft? Because it's still not looking the most promising on paper. Like, as good as Chigoziem Okonkwo could do with more opportunity and a much cleaner atmosphere than whatever the fuck was going on in Tennessee, the core is still lacking a little bit. They re-signed Treylon Burks earlier in free agency, but that's not something that's going to really take them over the top either. So the Commanders, even with making this move, it's a solid one, but it's still to be determined if they just don't pair this up with anything else. Because if those are your main 2 targets, you have to recognize that they're still going to need help no matter how good they are. And you want to try to fill this roster out completely. You don't want to leave so many blank spaces in there. So that's something that'll have to be resolved. The Patriots would sign Kevin Byard III to a 1-year, $9 million deal. Ain't that fit? You already understand that Kevin Byard III and Mike Vrabel had a great relationship with each other going all the way back to their Tennessee days, and now they're reconnected in New England, in Foxborough, for a Pats team that is trying to do everything in their power to get back to the Super Bowl after losing it in that gut-wrenching, heartbreaking fashion, to where people were believing, okay, they didn't even really stand a chance. They didn't even really compete in that game at all. That's got to be a tough pill to swallow right there. And the path for them, in this case, just starts with them getting some more experience in the locker room, I should say. In all honesty, with the Patriots, again, doing every single thing that they did in free agency last year and having most of those guys completely hit and make a good return of that, on that investment, I should say. There wasn't going to be a need for the Patriots to do anything particularly crazy in this offseason. They'd already accomplished what they needed to. They don't need to keep going buck wild, you know what I'm saying? They've already ushered themselves into being one of the better teams in the NFL, regardless of what you want to say about their schedule. Kevin Byard III adds a sort of ball hawk element to this Pats team, as well as an ability to provide solid run support if need be. I mean, it goes without saying. Like, this man has at least 105 tackles in 4 different seasons, including a 130 tackle campaign in 2024, his first year with the Bears. The Pats generally were fine at stopping the run, but to have that kind of player on the back end, understanding that even if these running backs, as fast as some of them might be, are getting to the second or third level of a particular defense, that last line of defense in Kevin Byard is going to be so technically sound that he prevents any opportunity for a gashing downfield run to go past him. It rarely happens, if at all. He's not the fastest guy in the world, and he doesn't need to be. If you can read gaps and coverages and assignments the way that he does with his tremendous football IQ. You also have to consider that he's led the league in interceptions 2 times, including last season, where he had 7, along with 93 tackles, en route to an AP first team selection. AP first team at the age of 32. So Kevin Byard III, even if you see how old he is, he'll be 93 eventually, but he's aging like Fun 1. Because to just provide that level of consistency, even when wear and tear is starting to settle in, that's how you know you've got a good safety on your hands. Genuinely. And the Patriots are not mad at this at all. Like, as good as Craig Woodson was for them as a fucking rookie last season, it never hurts to give him an opportunity to potentially work side by side along with an established veteran in Byard III, to walk him through all the different intricacies of the game and at the particular position he's playing at any one point of time. Like, they'll try to move Byard III around a little bit, I'm sure, but that's no sweat for him. And as for the Bears, I'm just like, this is obviously one of the first, but man, as we get into some of these other moves, I am shocked, genuinely shocked, because the entire conversation for them had been that they would keep every single one of these people intact. And somehow, some way, every single one of those intended deals did not come through. But we'll expand more on that point in just a sec. Right, the Bills signed Bradley Chubb to a 3-year, $43.5 million contract. And there are multiple ways to look at this. I mean, with most of the remaining edge rushers left in the entire free agency pool, he was probably one of the bigger names on the overall market. I don't think that can be denied. The fact that last season, somehow, some way, he still mustered an 8.5 sack season for the Dolphins, despite them not even having a back end to consist of. Not even remotely any sort of pulse whatsoever on that defensive backcourt. That's how bad that shit was. And he still managed to put that up last season. Had 47 tackles and 8 tackles per loss overall with 20 quarterback hits. When he is healthy, he is a person that can consistently generate pressure. But there was a shift when Jaelan Phillips got traded from that team. That was the same case with him too. The numbers couldn't always tell the full story with him also being injury prone to an extent, especially with him getting his young career started. But together, it was something that could work at times. And with moving on from Jaelan Phillips at the trade deadline last season, most of the burden was placed right back on Bradley Chubb's shoulders. For his season, you look at some of the splits in terms of the game log here, and I mean, for most of these games, especially after the trade deadline, because I believe that pretty much after the Ravens game, you would hear of Jaelan Phillips getting traded. And even then, with both of them, there were rumors flying around that they could be dealt to a different organization around this point. But it would be him who stayed, and in pretty much the next few games, for most of the rest of the season, he played as high of a percentage in terms of snaps per game on the defensive side than he ever had up to that point in the season, as far as that context goes. Now, admittedly, there was some minor increase in output, not anything too crazy, but he did have a 2-sack game against the Buccaneers to essentially close out the season, and after that particular point, he put up 4.5 overall to round out his year. So he finished, I guess, okay. That's really what you can say about this. It's not anything that's going to beat the world, but when he is at his best, he is still a person that can come in and set up other linemen very well in terms of being able to convert these into run stops in sacks. That is definitely a positive in Chubb's game. The thing is, if with the injuries, it's a major one. I mean, this is the same man who missed 12 games in 2019 and 9 games in 2021, then also missed the entire 2024 season with a torn ACL. Quite simply, his body has already taken a toll in terms of injuries, on top of experiencing the daily strain of playing NFL action on a week-to-week basis, sometimes within the span of just a few days with how these games are scheduled. And if you're the Bills, that is something that you have to seriously manage, because then you're playing yourself right back into everything that happened last year. They missed Ed Oliver Jr. for an extensive period of time. Joey Bosa was injured for a little bit. You had Matt Milano go down with injury as well. Dorian Strong went down with injury. They were missing several key pieces on that side of the ball. And that is kind of what led to them suffering the decline they had last season. Your main solution to that is to get another player who is somewhat inconsistent and not always reliable when it comes to his health. The Bills are clearly desperate to get that kind of pass rushing talent. And again, I'm the same person who literally mocked them to get Akeem Mesidor. It's like they need it. It's not, a secret for them at all. But getting Bradley Chubb in this situation, even if he is one of the bigger names, feels a little bit like they're settling for what they can get. Now, they're still somewhat okay because, again, Gregory Rousseau, even if everybody wants to just talk shit about their pass rush, like Gregory Rousseau is a pretty good end and edge rusher. No matter what happens, like, he's going to stick around. I totally believe that. But everything else around him and for most of that defense has proven to be somewhat unreliable. So I guess this is a move that they felt they needed to make. Understanding this as well, that you still have to make a decision on Joey Bosa. They signed him as a free agent for an average, I guess, that came out to just a little less than what Bradley Chubb is getting right now. In terms of this particular contract, at around $14.5 million, Joey Bosa got $12.5 million and is virtually a player who has dealt with some of the same injury bug issues. I'm not saying that they are the exact one-to-one player, but Bradley Chubb is nearing 30. Joey Bosa will turn 31. And you've already made the decision to extend Bradley Chubb for the long haul, while still, again, not even being all too sure if you want to bring Joey Bosa back. That's just kind of like, okay. What is the, if you were going to always have that mindset, then you're better off just letting Joey Bosa go. If for whatever reason Joey Bosa stays with this team and gets another contract, now you're trying to get yourself two older edge rushers who, again, bring the experience. They have the reputation in front of them. But you want to retain multiple of those guys in the same locker room. I just don't think that makes an optical amount of sense. They're trying. They're trying hard. But in some cases, trying doesn't cut it. They'd hope that this works, obviously. But this could also be fool's gold. Genuinely. Again, nothing's guaranteed until they actually go out there and start up these games for the next season. But I just, it's definitely weird to take in right now. It's like, are we serious? The Packers would sign Javon Hargrave to a 2-year, $23 million deal. That is some ironic stuff, to say the least. Man is literally coming from Minnesota, having dealt with the Vikings. And he is so willing to get out of that. They also, again, decided to shed his contract and conserve cap space. But the fact that he decides to go to a rival, a sworn rival, there had to be a little more there. There just had to be. Because that is the only thing at that point compelling him to make that decision. But with all that they've lost, including moving on from Colby Wooden for Zaire Franklin, as I detailed in the first of the waves in this overall thing, you probably need a bankable replacement at that position, and Javon Hargrave can more than provide that for you, I would say. He's proven that countless times. So I have no doubt he'll be able to come right in and carve out a nice role for this team. And then we get on to the Cowboys. They make a pair of moves, including trading Osa Odighizuwa Osa Odighizuwa to the 49ers in exchange for a 2026 third rounder, and also trading Solomon Thomas in a 7th round pick to Tennessee in exchange for a different 7th rounder. Riddle me this. Because right around this time, we always have to account for different franchise players looking for contract extensions and things of that nature. It's time to get that money working well for me and well for the business. The players are just pawns in this entire thing. And if they're costing me money, if they're costing me profit in this now $10+ billion organization that it's worth via Forbes and these valuation systems and everything like that, if it's costing me too much money, I'm not going for it. If they try to circumvent and subvert my authority in any way, I won't have it. I won't have it. You're going to make this deal with me and me only. And so I had this one player who was obviously great. Love him. Love him like a son. But he tried me. He tried to play me. He wanted to get a deal done through his agent. I'm like, fuck that agent. This is Jerry Jones you're talking to. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? So we had this constant back and forth. And I remember this one time, I had a conversation with him. I thought I had a deal done. Art of the deal. I had his word. And your word, when you're a grown man, two grown men, your word's got to mean something. So I took it at face value. I thought I had it done. And then he upped and left me. He upped and left me. I heard from that middling agent, he still wanted a shit ton of money, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was hard. This is a player that I had the utmost respect for. But he's got the same kinds of injury issues as my quarterback. And even if he's a generational talent, you can't make that kind of impact when you're sitting on the bench. Like Dak Prescott. Like my quarterback. So, with all that in mind, understanding where things were headed, I had to make a pretty tough decision. And I had to trade him. Now, yes, it happened to be to one of our sworn rivals over here in Dallas. As unfortunate as that was, you see the exorbitant amount of money they dished out to him. $47 million. I couldn't pay that if I tried. But hey, we got back a couple of them boys. We got back this very good defensive tackle. Older player, but such a rugged veteran. He knows how to play the game and play it well as a run stopper. We're going to be all good, I think. That impression and diatribe aside, I genuinely cannot believe the first one. Solomon Thomas, at this point, is just like an extra body to have on a team. I understand that aspect of things. It's unfortunate to, follow Solomon Thomas's career because he was honestly expected to be a far superior player at this point of time. It hasn't happened for him. That trade I can understand. You're not going to get much out of a deal involving him. But the fact that I go through all that, I go through saying all of that, it is almost as if this man forgot in the pursuit of getting Kenny Clark back in that deal. And people already didn't understand that return in the first place. Even with you getting 2 first-round picks, okay, that could be fine. But they might not turn into much depending on how good they are. You in the course of getting Kenny Clark, it's almost like he forgot that he just paid Osa Odighizuwa. You just paid this man last year. I believe it was like a 3-year, $60 million contract or something like that for Osa Odighizuwa. A man who would... Okay, 4 years, 4 years, $80 million. My fault. But yeah, you just paid him last year. That was an extension right there. And you, now, with having both Odighizuwa and Clark, are left to make a horrible fucking decision come time for the offseason. Is like, what are we actually doing? And Odighizuwa deserved that money with how he had been rising up the ranks on this Cowboys roster. So that is not something that's up for debate necessarily. It's just it's crazy, man. Last season, for Odighizuwa, he had 3.5 sacks, 44 tackles, and 6 tackles for loss with 23 quarterback hits, which tied his career high from last year, or the year before. They decided to give him this $20 million per year deal. What exactly was... I just don't understand the decision. How do you still choose to make the worst decision possible here? Because getting Kenny Clark is already bad enough in that situation. But even for the time that you did have him on the roster, what exactly is it that he could do that Osa Odighizuwa wasn't already as a player? Was there really any difference there to the point where you could not just decide to keep Odighizuwa at that point? Or even worse, even more drastic for them, admit even more defeat after getting Rashawn Gary last week and say, okay, we're just going to move on from Kenny Clark now. No, you somehow make the decision to move on from a man that you just paid and make your defensive tackle position even weaker. Because the way they run their scheme, they want to consistently run two out there. They want to have those edge rushers going to work on the outside, and they want that kind of collapse up the middle for multiple defensive tackles. And you just took your strongest one away and sent him to another one of your sworn fucking rivals. What sense does that make whatsoever? It just doesn't. And it's supposedly meant to clear up even more money for them to let them leave. What are you still going to do with that money that is now coming off of your books? What are you still going to do with that? Like, the entire free agency period has been so drastically bad for the Cowboys. It's not even me saying it just to punch down on a dead horse at this point. Not even close. This is legitimately like some of the worst roster management in financial allocation that you could potentially have. Because you're making all these different moves and trades for a pass rusher that doesn't even measure up to what Micah Parsons was doing. You're leaving another remnant of that Micah Parsons deal and taking away your strongest defensive tackle asset in one fell swoop, and you still have to make decisions on how to approach building this offensive line, building the entire defense back together, and actually committing to making some deals. Now, yes, they did re-sign Javonte Williams, which was smart. But what exactly is going on elsewhere? You're clearing up all this money, but you still want to franchise tag George Pickens. You haven't fucking signed a linebacker or a corner. Either of those positions, and you know you desperately need them. And from the lack of noise that I'm hearing about it, you don't even seem willing to do much of anything else, which makes no sense. So what exactly is their game plan? What are they trying to do? I'm genuinely left clueless by this at this point. Because all of these moves, for the most part, and lack thereof, are zero sum. You have no reason to look at the way you performed last year and think that you can keep back or retain most of the roster and expect to improve. Even with these players you're getting in a few of these positions, can you really sit there and tell yourself that they are good enough to completely turn around these records for you and convert immediately to more wins? No. Just no. In the 49ers case, they, after ironically enough losing Javon Hargrave, have been trying to find their own solutions at the defensive tackle position. And they've had to rely a lot on rookies. I think it was Malik Collins for a little bit, getting some burn at that position. It was CJ West last season with the slew of injuries that took place. The rookie getting some reps in at that position. So it's just been a revolving door of very I'm not going to say, like, I don't know, the names that they've relied upon to fill those responsibilities at the defensive tackle position have not really been optimal at all. And promptly, they haven't panned out all that much. Osa Odighizuwa has taken that ascent for years now, as I've said. That's why he got the fucking contract. So to now poach that, if you're the 49ers, it's one move, but that's a hell of a player to get in this situation. And so, from their perspective, it's a great deal. With the fact that they've been a little more aggressive into getting some high-quality free agents at key positions, they can afford to move on from a third-round pick. You think they're going to care about that now if their mentality is to truly win now? Which is something that the Cowboys are still trying to figure out the meaning of. Yes, there are always parallels between the Cowboys and the Cowboys West, as they say. But hey, the fact that the 49ers could experience the injury bug to a whole new level last season and still somehow qualify for the playoffs and win a playoff game, with Mac Jones getting some game action for them across a few starts and having them split between Jones and Purdy for a while with the injuries that have been going on. In most other situations, that would derail a team's season. And the 49ers figured it out. And they need those injuries to obviously temper down a little bit, make sure that their guys are mostly healthy, but they've now put themselves right back into the mix. And you have to consider how it had been for the 49ers defense as well. Because even when some of those players were healthy, it was just not as imposing as it once was. You bring in Nick Bosa, a healthy Nick Bosa now, to continue to do the damage he does on the outside, and then have Osa Odighizuwa clogging up potential run lanes on the inside. Something that the 49ers are desperately looking for. The way that they had the ball ran all over them last season, and especially when you look at the past few games of that year. We always talk about the Bears game. We always talk about the Seahawks in consecutive weeks. Well, not consecutive weeks. The final game of the regular season and then the divisional round just got it fucking gashed with inside run after inside run after inside run. And in most cases, they'd use that inside leverage that the 49ers would have to compensate completely against them to work it back to the outside for huge gains. They were just toying around with them at that point. And the 49ers with this move are saying, hey, we are not going to allow something like that to go down ever again. We're going to do everything in our power to fortify that front line and make sense while doing it. I mean, fuck. Like, jeez, man. It's like if you're the Cowboys, a third round pick and some of the other picks that they have could be utilized to help them get maybe another interior defensive lineman. But you had a sure thing in Odighizuwa that was already fucking paid. I don't know what made them believe that it was a good idea to just let him get traded in this situation. I don't know why. The Seahawks re-signed swing tackle, left tackle Josh Jones. And hey, that post definitely highlighted his importance, which made sense. Chris Stoll, the long snapper, and also they granted a 1-year, $3.5 million tender to Jake Bobo that could open it up to being matched by other teams looking for a wide receiver. And if they do, there's a chance for the Seahawks to lose Bobo. Now, that would suck. I mean, you got to have more Bobo in your locker room. You know what I mean? It's as simple as that. This goes without saying. In all seriousness, though, his sparse ability to make those big-time plays, even if he's not, a consistent weapon used in that offense, has been great to see. And as a blocker especially, that's where he's going to make most of his money. They have specific multi-wide receiver sets with him being one of the perimeter blockers. And they just kept on going crazy with it. Like, he's truly got the skills that you would need to perform exceptionally well as a blocker in that system. And stuff like that is not something that can be easily replaced. But it all depends on how other teams view him as a player in terms of the market. We'll see. The Ravens signed Jaylinn Hawkins to a 2-year deal. And with them losing Darius Washington to the Giants, I suppose it made sense. I don't know why I kept confusing Jaylinn Hawkins for being a rookie receiver, or rookie safety rather, for some reason. But he genuinely, with the Patriots, played very, very well. The Ravens want to consistently run these 3 safety systems, and under a new defensive coordinator, that could change, with Zach Orr being out and Jesse Minter being in. We'll say that if anybody has mastered that, it is probably going to be Jesse Minter. And with Hawkins' skill set, I mean, he doesn't have the same kind of versatility, but he'll pitch in the effort to play all over the field if he needs to and try to make plays that way. He can definitely perform well in run support. And honestly, in situations where with a third safety, they may occasionally ask him to play in the box, it helps to know that you have multiple people that can fill that responsibility. Now, I'd imagine that most of the time, because again, you want him closer to the play, it's going to be Kyle Hamilton lining up in that position, and you're going to have Jaylinn Hawkins trailing him in some way, whether he's a little deeper or whether he's covering a flat route. So they're going to find some creative ways to use those guys all over the defense. And now Hawkins will be the latest one in that mix. It was truly a great year for him. But, again, with the Patriots deciding to take a short-term rental and a potential bridge gap to include Kevin Byard III on their roster, it was also a matter of time for Jaylinn Hawkins at that point. There wouldn't be a need for the Patriots to keep both if that was the man they were going after the whole time. The Chargers signed Keaton Mitchell to a 2-year, $9.25 million deal. I wonder why Keaton Mitchell joined another Harbaugh. I just can't put my finger on it. When Keaton Mitchell has played, and I guess this has been to the disdain of every single Ravens fan out there, when Keaton Mitchell has gotten some opportunities to rush the football, he can be pretty electric with it. For a while, he had one of the highest yards per carry averages for running backs, point blank, period. And he didn't even end up qualifying for that because he didn't get the amount of necessary targets or rushes attempts that you would need in a single season to do so. Not every play is going to be a home run hitter, but if you have that kind of speed on you and you know how to use it, that is certainly a good weapon to have. Especially with him being on the shorter side as a running back. It could be a nice change of pace from what it is that they'll be looking for Marion Hampton to do in his second season as he tries to get through a fully healthy one also. As for the Ravens in this entire thing, there's a world in which they probably could have kept Keaton Mitchell if that was the buzz around the situation. If they wanted to keep him, okay. Even if we want to say that, man, they had their opportunity to just completely bypass re-signing Justice Hill and retaining Keaton Mitchell for the long term. By the time that Justice Hill signed that contract, they already made their decision. They already did. The Bengals had signed Orlando Brown Jr. to a 2-year contract extension. The Eagles would restructure a 2-year, $36 million deal for Landon Dickerson. And the Bengals would sign Jonathan Allen, which is sneaky. He has also had his own recent injury history. And with the Bengals not having much margin for error at this point, they want to make sure that they can get the healthiest guys imaginable. Jonathan Allen might not fit that bill, but you know what? They're going to need him to do it. Because when it comes to him, he is truly a force at the defensive line position. Now, no, he may not always be able to generate pressure, but he has been a stout force since he's entered the league as a defensive tackle. And if you're the Bengals, you are giving him a multi-year deal. I don't think it's too expensive. And you usher him automatically into the number one slot at that particular position on the defensive end. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. In terms of, overall sack production, it's dropped over the last 4 years or so since his back-to-back Pro Bowl nods. And he did have 68 tackles last year with 7 tackles for loss and 11 quarterback hits as well. And a fumble recovery. So, like, he can provide you with a little bit of everything. But they're going to want to look for the youth movement somewhere. He'll be 31. He already is 31, so they'll have to work around that, but that's not a bad move at all. The Commanders signed Rachaad White to a 1-year deal. I can't say I'm a fan of that. Now, I will say that as a receiving threat out of the backfield, he is elite at that. I won't deny it. However, and this is a big however, this is the similar stuff that Brian Robinson Jr. was pulling off, and they decided to trade him. Then you go through all the motions of not truly having a run game outside of occasionally Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and you bring in a man in Rachaad White who, quite frankly, to this point, has not, in the NFL at least, reached that kind of concentration of overall snaps as a potential number one in that backfield. He never has in college. So to expect that to immediately change in year 2, well, not year 2, but it's still going to take some work. The Falcons signed Samson Ebukam. The Dolphins signed both Tutu Atwell and Marco Wilson to 1-year deals. Marco Wilson, when he has been on the field, is a solid corner. Maybe not a cornerback 1, but he'll be able to occasionally make the good play for you. So that's a smart one. It's short term. You don't risk too much, and you still give yourself room to get some younger guys at that position. And then with Tutu Atwell, while I didn't initially understand it because, at that point, get ready to learn special teamer for Malik Washington. You have all these guys who are filling more return specialist roles, trying to fill out true wide receiver slots. And again, with some of that going down for Miami, it clearly hasn't worked to this point. So to stick with that again, that felt a little weird to me at the time. The 49ers would see edge rusher Bryce Huff retire from the NFL. He was starting a different company up as an entrepreneur. And with that going on launch, he decided that his focus and time was going to be spent more on handling that. Again, as great as the NFL can be, for some people out there, it is not the only thing that matters. And to hear about that is honestly pretty special. The 49ers would sign Dre Greenlaw to a 1-year, $7.5 million deal. Okay. Dre Greenlaw is back, huh? Not supposed to scare people? But no joke, when he was there, I mean, there's no debating that he was one of the best linebackers in the league at that point. He's going to know the system better than most people. So, this is another good fit. Right, the Seahawks would make a couple more moves as they would sign both Emmanuel Wilson and also Rodney Thomas II from the Colts to 1-year deals each. And both of them are very interesting when you think about it. I've extensively talked about Emmanuel Wilson for quite some time between different Packers games last season, and recapping them, as well as the fact that he was initially released by the Packers earlier in the offseason. And his change of pace is something that brings tremendous value. I was looking at some of the commentary on this specific Seahawks-centric site that posted the news, and they may be right in that his vision as a runner might not necessarily be the best, and he may not have the kind of talent that people would be expecting the Seahawks to recoup on from losing Kenneth Walker III. That may not be the case. But what he can do is give you a steady diet of hard-nosed running and good play on the field throughout an entire season, especially in situational football. The amount of times that when Jacobs was in, I guess, a little bit of a tired state, or even on third downs, they consistently relied on Emmanuel Wilson to get in there and do the dirty work for them. And with how it's looking right now, of course, the Seahawks could always draft a running back as well with one of their picks, although they only have 4 entering this draft. With Charbonnet in there, in the kind of power that he possesses, Emmanuel Wilson, with that dynamic, doesn't really allow you to miss a beat. He's going to play the exact same way, even if the results might not always match up. And for a team that's honestly just trying to take things in a steady manner, that's the best thing that you could possibly get after if you are the Seahawks in this situation. So that's a solid pickup for them. Also, Rodney Thomas II, with another Seahawks-centric post that mentioned this news, he devolved from a starting caliber safety for the Colts to a special teamer, essentially filling that role, and still doing enough to provide some solid, I guess, repetition out there. The thing it came down to was that he had tackling issues. And last season, he had 21 total. The year before, in 17 games, he had 7, which does kind of concern me because, he might not have started in any of these games. He played in all 17. He came up with 7 tackles. That could be concerning. But in terms of, special teams play, I mean, these are where some of the same Seahawks players that they're retaining made their marks initially. Did you believe that Ty Akata or Drake Thomas, a man who had recently developed into the starting linebacker for the Seahawks this season, where else do you think they got their starts from? They were both special teamers, primarily. And they elevated to those starting positions as the year went on, and as necessity, in a case especially like Ty Akata's, called for it. Thomas II, with the absence of Kobe Bryant, you are getting a cheaper safety option, and I'm sure that, again, they'll try to find other ways, because if he's going to be relied upon as a starter, I mean, he, did start out his first couple years getting those responsibilities for the Colts, but you may caution trusting him to do that again if over the last 2 seasons his role on that Colts team has just diminished. Still, he's been durable. He's played in all 17 games in each of his first 4 seasons. And, to have that kind of consistency on your roster with your starters being able to carve out a good chunk of games, with your backups being able to chart out a good chunk of games, that can carry you far with being simply available. How many times do we stress that in regards to any sport, honestly? You're going to find very few players who can pull that off for a number of different reasons. And if Thomas II can even offer up spot formation style contributions, that just adds even more to the layer of this great Seahawks defense incoming. So these are respectable moves to take into account. Jakeem Grant Sr. had retired from the NFL after 6 seasons. Now, he is a player who, again, will primarily be remembered as a return specialist, but man, he was a damn good one when he was playing. It's just that for a while with him, he spent 2021, or the second half of the 2021 season with the Bears, and then he just hasn't been heard from in pretty much the past 5+ years. I mean, he has not been on an NFL roster. He had been, I guess, on a few practice squads, but he hadn't really leveled back up to that kind of play where he could be trusted by any of the primary teams on that organization to field the 53-man roster. So he's just been in this obscure state for all this time. And I suppose after a while, with him now being at the age of 33, with other slot-style players starting to fill out this position, the window for him to really make an impact with the team still was kind of closing. Now, again, I don't know what exactly was the final push for Jakeem Grant Sr. to make this decision, but I suppose that after a while, he just decided that it would be the sensible thing to do. He'd been in the league since 2016, and he was a 5'7", 172-pound wide receiver, straight up. So there was already going to be a question surrounding just how much he could really last in the NFL as it was. And I mean, when he was on the field, he was one of the better kick returners at the time, for damn sure. He made a couple All-Pro second-team selections doing exactly that in back-to-back seasons in 2020 and 2021. So he had the skill set to at least provide you with serviceable play, and he'd occasionally, get some reps on offense from time to time. That wasn't necessarily his role. You consider the directions that both of these teams have taken as well, the Dolphins and the Bears, in their final seasons with him. And at that point, you are getting another player, if you're the Dolphins, and Jalen Waddle, who can light up the fucking field with his blazing fast speed. Alongside Tyreek Hill as well, who they'd eventually go and get. There just wouldn't be room for Jakeem Grant Sr. in that system. The 2020 and 2021 Bears, mind you, were already one of the worst receiving corps assembled in quite some time. One of the absolute worst. You just take a look at this team and you just hear some of the names that filled out wide receiver positions on this team. Okay? You had Jakeem Grant Sr. You had Darnell Mooney. You had Allen Robinson II for a time. Damiere Byrd, Marquise Goodwin. And you add Jakeem Grant Sr. into that mix. And you ask yourself, how the hell did this team still win 6 games that year? With that kind of a receiver core. How the fuck did they pull that off? It is one of the unknown mysteries that we will never have the answer to. But clearly now the Bears are in a much better place. And when you see the kind of wide receiver talent consistently coming into the league, even now with slimmer guys, like Xavier Worthy running a 4.21 while also being at around 170 pounds. Brennan Thompson running around a 4.26 while being slightly taller and even thinner at around 160 pounds. Entering this NFL draft, looking for his own spot in the league, with him being an older commodity at this point, it would be very naive of a team out there to look at him now, after not playing in the NFL for more than 5 years, and say, okay, you know what? You remember this guy from 5 years ago? Yeah, I want to take a chance on him. I want to see if he can give us a spark on X aspect of our team. This is the what have you done lately for me league. And again, there could have been a number of different things keeping Jakeem Grant Sr. out of the sport entirely, out of the view of the league. But with that kind of silence and with that non-action from those around him, from those in his camp, however you want to look at it, there just wasn't really a way for him to get his foot back in the door, unfortunately. He just decided to make the decision official. And I don't know what exactly he plans to do moving forward. But hopefully he does well in those particular ventures. He'll definitely be remembered for his contributions for at least a few good years in the mix. So that is definitely something worth considering. The Giants signed Calvin Austin III to a 1-year deal. After losing Wan'Dale Robinson, to get a player who's going to fill out more of a slot role for them makes sense. Now, from my perspective, if they rely on Calvin Austin III to do anything outside of that, they're going to completely screw themselves over. And initially, when I heard that this was the player in which they were deciding to pick up, I'm like, okay, it's not a number 2 guy. He's 5'9", 162 pounds. But to have him as a potential rotating party in the slot could help them. Now, again, his hands are definitely questionable. And the idea of him creating separation when he's going to have those bodies consistently thrown in front of him is always going to be a struggle to navigate as well. But with their new game plan incoming this season, they expect that they'll be able to provide him with some open lanes. So it's an okay move for the Giants. It's not anything that's going to blow the door wide open. But with it being somewhat linear, and with you not truly addressing the number 2 wide receiver slot, although Darius Slayton is still there, it does kind of read like, hey, if you were really thinking about it, there is still a world in which they could choose to draft a wide receiver. They really could. I can see it leaning that way. With how all of these moves have stacked together over the course of the entire offseason, it feels on one end like they might go after a guy like Sonny Styles. And I'd mocked him to go to the Giants numerous times. Because again, to pair him up with Tremaine Edmonds now, and having Kayvon Thibodeaux and Brian Burns on that edge, and Dexter Lawrence II in that middle, doing what he does to ball carriers, oh my, man, that could be fucking filthy. But depending on what happens with a guy like Darius Slayton, there is a big gap there in between what Malik Neighbors provides you as the number one guy, and he'll obviously hold down that role. You don't have much certainty at any other position. And what better time to take an opportunity to select either of maybe Carnell Tate, like it's been mocked previously, maybe Jordan Tyson? You have your choices here. So I expect that thought to be creeping in their minds a little bit. We all know that whatever happens, it's not going to be fully in Joe Schoen's control. Right, Joe? The Vikings officially did the thing. And all these moves have been per Adam Schefter, per other NFL team base sites, and also some of Ian Rappaport, some of Jordan Schultz. So I've just got to give credit there. I had to do a much better job of tracking that down. This one came from Schefter, though, and others. But it had been rumored for weeks after the regular season ended that the Vikings were a team that could consider picking up Kyler Murray's services. And that ramped up even further when they officially released him, or gave word that they would officially release him at the start of the new league year. And Minnesota wasted no time selecting him on a veteran minimum contract. Now again, we obviously just had this happen with Tua Tagovailoa. Kyler Murray, even with what people want to say about him, can be deemed as a player with maybe a higher ceiling. And at the moment, he is far less expensive than Tua Tagovailoa is. Now, the Cardinals still have to eat about $34 million or so of those dollars. But the Vikings are now getting him for cheap at around a little over $1 million. For at least competent quarterback play. Like, yes, Kyler Murray is in an awkward position. You know, he was projected to come in and be this generational talent that could set forth the next couple of decades of Cardinals football when he was drafted number 1 in 2019. It didn't come even remotely close to anything like that. But at the very least, when he was actually focused on studying film, the man was legitimately a good quarterback for the team. And at the very least, could provide them with dynamic play when he was healthy. Which is something that has been a rarity for him. In 3 of the last 4 seasons, he's missed at least 6 or more games. He missed 9 in 2023 and obviously 12 last year. With things literally getting so bad to where, hey, okay, is he available to come back? Or, you know what? No. With what Jacoby Brissett's doing, maybe we're just going to let him sit for the rest of the season. Because, you know, we're sick of this. We're sick of being in this rut as an organization. And we thought the man could pull us out of it. He didn't even come remotely close to doing it. We have to let him walk. Because for as good as Kyler Murray has been, inconsistency has been the key downside for him. Obviously, when you throw in a clause like that and believe that your quarterback is not taking the job and everything that comes with it seriously, that's a huge red flag to have. with him being a franchise guy. And it sent shockwaves through pretty much every media cycle at that point of time. Because it's like, what are you doing? It's rough to see that from the Cardinals' perspective. They get nothing back. His value had diminished that greatly. That all it took was for the Vikings to say, we'll pick him up for cheap. And now you have to take on this massive cap hit for a quarterback who is not going to be there. And to now change direction entirely, which may take them a little while. Now, they've been mocked to go after a guy like Ty Simpson. They also have the option to stave it off entirely and wait for the 2027 draft to make a move. Most of the Cardinals' pickups in this free agency period have screamed rebuild. Especially Tyler Allgeier. I don't care if he was one of the top free agents at the running back position on the market. The man has consistently been a complimentary running back. And they still don't have an idea of where they're headed there. Although there was a report, just to, I guess, briefly tie that in, the Chiefs had picked up Emari Demercado, so that's at least one running back down. But the room is still relatively weak. And when Kyler Murray is left to scramble for his life as a result of poor offensive line play and the lack of attention on this rushing attack, it leaves him in an interesting spot where it's like, what exactly do you want from him at that point? With him being a more spread-style player, he's going to rely heavily on a good running game to complement him. And the Cardinals, after a while, along with James Conner and Trey Benson going down, could no longer provide that in 2025. Then he himself goes down, and the rest is history in regards to that. But you know what? Maybe it's the best thing for Kyler Murray to just get out of there. Because, again, I genuinely cannot understand what the Cardinals are trying to get at here. I'll say this, and it's probably obvious, which is why the Vikings are still kicking themselves now. But if there is one person, I'll say there are very few people in the NFL, coordinators, head coaches, that you can trust to truly rejuvenate a quarterback. I already mentioned that guys like Kingsbury have done it. A guy like Sean McVay has done it for a while. But one of the key pieces to that equation as well is Kevin O'Connell. What has he consistently done? When he had Kirk Cousins, he made that man look like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL before the pressure started kicking in. We all understand what he did with Sam Darnold, and it still wasn't enough for a collective to come together and say that we trusted Sam Darnold moving forward enough. The money didn't align, so we'll just let him walk totally out of our building and not even make a second attempt, a third attempt, to try to regain his services. No, we're just going to let him walk. Now he's got the opportunity to do the same thing with a more experienced Kyler Murray, who at the very least, again, has a basic understanding of what the hell he's doing, and who will provide the most capable quarterback play they could ask for post Sam Darnold. Say what you want about whichever person in that organization is solely responsible for making the decision to allow Sam Darnold to roam free elsewhere and eventually take his talents to Seattle with it paying off for a Super Bowl ring, okay? whoever you want to blame for that, it doesn't necessarily matter. Because all of the media hype surrounding a J.J. McCarthy debut completely went out the window after the second week of the season. And I'm pretty sure that was the game where, let me see, because I know that there was a game early in the year where, the Falcons in that young pass rush got after his ass mightily. I know it was definitely early in the season. I just want to make sure. But yeah, for sure, after at least the second week of the year, all that shit died down. Because the worst that could happen for J.J. McCarthy, in all essence, did. He was placed into a scenario of which he was truly not ready for. And he dealt with injury issues. And there was no way at this point for the Vikings to overcome it, despite all their efforts to have the defense complement this and suffocate other teams for as long as possible. That lack of consistency at the quarterback position, even if, it isn't always needed to be looked at as the most important position on the field. But goddamn, you have to have some kind of consistent play from that position. And you need a person back there who understands the playbook, who understands the nuances of the game, which is something that J.J. McCarthy, and again, you can say that with it being his first true exhibition after being injured in the 2024 season, maybe that already put him at a little bit of a disadvantage. I'll give you that. But you moved on from a person who ended up winning a Super Bowl ring, and also, for at least the first half of the season, was an MVP candidate in Sam Darnold. And that pressure became self-imposed with the way y'all were talking about J.J. McCarthy. With the way J.J. McCarthy was talking about J.J. McCarthy and his fucking alter ego. They put that pressure on themselves. And no amount of production last season even rose to that level of buzz that they had. None of it. Then you had a situation arise early as well where there's a pseudo quarterback battle between he and fucking Carson Wentz. Then he gets injured. They both get injured. And you're dealing with Max Brosmer. You needed a quarterback. Desperately. Because if for another season you had to relegate yourselves to watching that trio, hell, that duo, play again and play meaningful games again, you were about to see a good amount of Vikings fans revoke their fucking season ticket memberships. That's how bad this was about to get. Because Max Brosmer himself, even though the stuff was so terrible to look at, it's what you would expect from an undrafted free agent coming in as a rookie, not expecting to play, and then being asked to do so on a whim. Just like that. What the fuck did they think was going to happen? Yes, this Falcons game was the second game of the season. Just because he came back against the Bears and had one of the better displays in the second half of that game especially, he was on his jersey number for that week and some change, and then just ran into a brick wall. Everything else went downhill from there. Everything else. Like, say what you want about Kyler Murray, man. But with him being in that offense, being able to provide them with a little bit of a run game, self-imposed himself, and having the traits to effectively spread the ball around to other weapons on that team, Kyler Murray could be up to bat as the next to face and confront a potential rejuvenation from the tutelage of Kevin O'Connell. And no matter what happens, it'll be interesting to see how everything goes. If nothing else, you can ensure that Justin Jefferson is also going to get fed. Now, you have to commend him for not being a diva wide receiver. But I promise you, if he had to deal with either one of those two quarterbacks again for back-to-back seasons, he was going to request a trade. He won't come out and say that publicly. But at that point, what's truly stopping him from wanting off of that team at that point? Because, again, to this time, as I've said before, the fact that Justin Jefferson is regarded as one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL, and hasn't even really sniffed playoff action, is a fucking crime. And they would have been headed in a similar direction if they decided to say, you know what, we're going to field either Brosmer or McCarthy again. To the Vikings, in this regard, though, if they want Kyler Murray to make the most out of his rushing ability, which he can with how fast that he is, you also have to try to build a run game around him. With no Aaron Jones Sr. there anymore after you release him for cap space purposes, and also picking up Jordan Mason, you're now left with Jordan Mason, and I think still, to this point, Todd Chandler. That isn't the most inspiring running back room in the world. They should be looking for somebody. Now, with them, having a later pick, they're probably not going to get their hands on a guy like Jeremiah Love, but there are some other solid running backs, even if it's a weaker class, for you to at least take a chance on. You have to try, because those two are not going to truly assist Kyler Murray in that regard. That's not something that you can count on. It's a long fall for Kyler Murray, but at least he's in a good position to be a starter again. They were out here saying this man could go back to the MLB. Because to this point, even though he hasn't really expressed a desire to go there, the Oakland, I can't even say that. The Athletics, let's just say that, they still have his draft rights from 2018. So, if he ever made that decision, he could instantly join the team. And that's how good he was as a multi-sport prospect and a baseball player. But, from one dysfunctional organization to another, how about you niggas go find a home first? The A's will be playing another season in Sacramento, if that makes any fucking sense to you. On top of them not even being able to get a consistent concentration, a consistent population of attendance at their games. Because I think they were like one of the worst in the MLB in that regard. And of course, they're playing in a minor league stadium. Go find a home. Get into a truly major league-esque park. Build one. Get yourselves in that scenario first before you try to get your hands on Kyler Murray. Also, too, that just wouldn't make a lot of sense. Because I'd imagine that you'd probably have Kyler Murray playing either second base or shortstop in that sport. And did they not draft a baseman in Nick Kurtz and a shortstop in Jacob Wilson, who have already become two of the better players on that team? Where, even if Kyler Murray could still be that good, where would he fit in? You have to really think about that for a second. So, nah. The NFL ensures that he is here to stay and potentially get himself on that rejuvenated path. The Bills would sign C.J. Gardner-Johnson to a 1-year deal. The Raiders would sign Connor Heyward to a 2-year, $5.5 million contract extension, which I really do like. Consider him their new Jakob Johnson. Raiders had Jakob Johnson earlier in the decade and holding down the fullback position, and they're going to ask a younger Connor Heyward to do essentially the same thing in that offense. Maybe they decide to run a few Spartan plays if they're feeling froggy enough. Speaking of Spartan, the Steelers would poach the third of all of the Bears safeties that were on the docket in this free agency period, and they would get their hands on Jaquan Brisker, sign him to a 1-year, $5.5 million deal to continue blitzing the living shit out of the Ravens. In all honesty, Hawkins might be a solid pickup for them. But I'm still saying, even if Brisker costs a little more money, and even if he's a little younger, I'm like, how are you the Ravens and you don't make a single call to pick that man up when he enters free agency, understanding that you lost Darius Washington and understanding that you like to play 3 safeties on the field? If Brisker is your third safety, or you can slot another one of your safeties down to that position, bruh, you are not going to get picked on at all. Brisker has the versatility to keep in line with all of that. And I just find it a huge whiff on the Ravens' part that they didn't even make a play for him at all. You leave that open for everyone else to get their hands on. And ironically enough, your strongest rival gets their hands on him. Now, just what exactly do you think is going to happen from there? This man, Jaquan Brisker, is about to be in for a crazy season. He is literally a hometown kid, being born in Pittsburgh. He played at Penn State in a different D3 college in the Pennsylvania area before transferring to Penn State at that time. So the connections there run deep for him already. And with the Steelers being in desperate need of a safety, the role can change for Jaquan Brisker as well. If he was going to be a tertiary receiver for the Ravens, or tertiary safety rather, for the Ravens, well, he'll probably be one of the main features and a far cheaper option for that Steelers defense. Consider this. His ability to move all around the field, with the fact that Jalen Ramsey is also trying to fill out the safety position in a sense to conserve his career and keep his longevity going as a player, that provides him with a little bit of breathing room. Because all the onus in that situation, you allow Brisker to have that ability to roam everywhere, and you give Jalen Ramsey the room to thump the living hell out of players and do what he does best with some of the coverage skills that he already possesses. And again, with you being one of the more expensive defenses last year, you get far under that by getting a very talented player in Brisker for just $5.5 million a year. $5.5 million, I should say. It's a hell of a steal for the Steelers in this case. And I totally love the move. I can't wait to see what Brisker does, to be honest with you. The Titans would sign Tony Adams to a 1-year deal. The Eagles would sign former Falcons linebacker Arnold Ebiketie to a $7.3 million deal for a single year. He's an interesting case. I think they were trying to look at him as an edge rusher. I know he was drafted primarily as a linebacker, but I guess from him, being a Falcon and being a part of that much improved pass rush last year, you gotta give it a little bit of merit here. He is also 27 years old, and he'll fill out that position. His career to this point, from where he was considered, he also came from Penn State, ironically enough. Drafted in the 2nd round. The production hasn't really lived up to that billing. He has just 16.5 sacks in 4 years. And he hasn't really been a starting caliber player. But for the Eagles, they go deep in their edge rushing pool, which I've already stated. They don't need Ebiketie to be one of their main guys. They just need him to be a part of a system, a hive, if you will, that truly gels together when it matters the most. In a similar way that the Seahawks are doing with their depth in the pass rushing department. So they can live with that. And again, you're getting them for cheap, not even nearly compared to what the hell you would have had to shell out to Jaelan Phillips. Even if he might have been worth that. Newsflash, he was worth that shit. But that's just me. The Cowboys would sign DeCobie Durant to a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. By all means, Durant is a solid cornerback. But again, on top of all the other things you have done to create a surplus of free money to use for cap purposes. That's the first move you make after trading Osa Odighizuwa away. That's the first pickup you have. It's to get DeCobie Durant. You've waited too fucking long. You've waited too long. Like, there are probably still players on the board that are a little better that you could go out there and get, and you can't because you're just stalling. What the hell are you stalling for? This is crazy. It's like, what are we doing? Now, looking at this overall, at the cornerback position, there aren't too many good names remaining. Each and every single one of these players have their faults as corners. And I still do expect the Cowboys to draft one. Maybe they're trying to get themselves back on the right track. But again, you have to be able to, I don't know. It could be a solid pickup, but bro, you just need far more than this in the talent department and inconsistency as well. Like, you're waiting this long in between moves, and even more guys are going to be taken off the board at this point. Y'all better get far more active than this. This is what they were alluding to. The second that it was detail, that the cap space was increasing, they were saying they were going to spend more money, and I'm like, okay, you say it, you're not acting like it whatsoever, even still, to this point. The activity isn't matching that statement you had at all. So it's like, what is it gonna take at that point? What is it gonna take? I'm lost, dude. It makes no sense to me. It really doesn't. The Chargers would sign Dalvin Tomlinson to a 1-year deal. The Colts would sign Jonathan Owens to a 1-year deal as well. The Panthers would sign Rasheed Walker, one of the tackles for the Packers formerly, to a 1-year deal worth up to $10 million. The Lions would sign Tyler Conklin to a 1-year deal. Maybe it is an upgrade over having Anthony Firkser field receptions for the first time in 4 years, and same for Tom Kennedy. But that's who you decide to get to back up Sam Laporta. Okay. The Steelers signed Sebastian Joseph-Day to a 2-year, $11 million deal. Pairing him up in that good, honestly, core of defensive tackles. I mean, you've got Derek Harmon as well. You've re-signed Cameron Heyward for the short term. And you also have Sebastian Joseph-Day being able to come in, provide you with that solid support amongst those front lines, and bridge the gap for the next great defensive tackle in the Steelers franchise. That could be in Harmon. You also have Benton at that nose tackle position. Like, they have a pretty good... I don't think that gets talked about enough. The amount of talent that they have at the defensive tackle position, specifically, is exceptionally good. And it's like, yes, Cameron Heyward is a dominant force, but, bruh, even if he were to, and it's looking on, honestly, like, that potential retirement is on the way far sooner than later for him. Because, especially as a late bloomer in the NFL, he still carved out such a long, extensive, and fruitful career with this Steelers team. If they can try to get another Super Bowl out of this, it would mean everything to him, and I understand that. But even still, if he were to walk away, they've still got talent coming in at that position. And it's really at that point, with having those veterans paired up with those younger guys, it's really just about making sure they apply it to the actual game. But I like that. It's not anything too crazy. It's fairly cheap, but the production from him is going to carry over greatly and will be worth far more than the deal itself. The Dolphins signed David Ojabo to a 1-year deal. The Dolphins themselves are still in a position to draft one. But think about this. Now, again, a lot of the edge rushers, even those who might have gotten overpaid, have been taken off. My thing with this move is this. Ojabo was a member of one of the worst pass rushing teams in the NFL, point blank period, last season, and he still, over the likes of guys like Kyle Van Noy, an older Kyle Van Noy, an older Draymond Jones, and a rookie in Mike Green with as raw of a talent as he was projected to be coming out of last year's draft, he still did not feel starting caliber reps with that team. I don't think the Dolphins are expecting him to transform his role completely, and I hope not. because that just wouldn't make sense. You think on a far inferior Dolphins team, he's going to emerge as the leading man? If anything, all of that movement to clear Jaelan Phillips in Bradley Chubb off of the team, if anything for me, that just opens the door for Chop Robinson to contribute more, which is honestly something I haven't talked about enough, and that's on me. But Chop Robinson is a recent draftee for the Dolphins, honestly trying to do everything in his own power to carve out a solid career for himself. And he's going to have a lot of opportunities. He's just turned 23 years old on January 2nd. He is a young lad looking to make a name for himself. And, production for him is something that could be on the rise. Because he's had 10 sacks in his first 2 seasons, but he's only had 4 starts in 32 games played. And that's going to be as a result of playing behind those guys. He emerges as one of the main threats off the edge now. And no matter what happens with the Dolphins, if there is anything to look forward to, it is seeing what you have now in that man, with him being gone. Phillips and Chubb, I should say. The world is his oyster, and he has a chance to rise above all expectation, or just prove to be another standard average edge rusher. We'll see how that ends up going. That's what that says to me. It's not even really about David Ojabo himself. It's like, are we serious, bro? The Bengals signed Josh Johnson. The Chargers re-signed Trey Lance on a 1-year, $6.75 million deal. And the Giants signed Darnell Mooney to a 1-year deal worth up to $10 million. So now this just brings the question, with that recently happening, okay, what are they even thinking about with Darius Slayton at this point? What are they even thinking about? Now you're crowding up that wide receiver room a little too crazy. And I don't know about Darnell Mooney. Because he has just proven that he can't be trusted as a player. He's proven that already. And I've already went through that when I detailed that the Falcons released him. So at that point, I'm like, yeah, as a tertiary option, potentially, on any given Sunday, he can make his mark. But as constructed right now, Darnell Mooney would be your number 2 wide receiver, and I don't personally like that. I don't. He's got the ability at times to stretch the ball down the field, but again, he is so unreliable as a true receiver that it's like, how exactly are they trying to go about this at this point? What exactly are they looking for? Do they still want to draft the wide receiver at this point? I think they should. But it puts one of those jobs on ice. So I'd definitely be looking in to see how Darius Slayton is projected to, I guess, move around the market within the next few weeks. Like, I don't know. Darius Slayton is yet another player who, as a result of being on the Giants really just doesn't get as much overall attention. And it's like, even with him in that offense, despite him honestly having the tangible assets to be a number 2 wide receiver, he saw his role diminish last year even. 37 receptions for a near career low 538 yards and a touchdown. And he started in 12 of the 14 games he played in. It's looking really weird for the Giants right now. But again, if they can add a wide receiver to this and solidify at least their top 2, you have some solid depth at this spot, okay? You really do. But that is the cap. That is the limit that each and every single one of these guys have. We saw glimpses of what it looked like when Darnell Mooney was the best receiver on a team. And that was that aforementioned 2021 Bears wide receiver core of absolute doom. That while they still managed to get 6 wins, did not go down as a truly effective team. We saw the struggles the Steelers had with Calvin Austin III being their second wide receiver. And Darius Slayton, honestly, has never been able to break out of that. Now, granted, some of that isn't his fault. I mean, they made the genius decision to see glimpses of what Kenny Golladay was doing in Detroit and said, you know what? I'm going to pay him a 4-year deal, and I'm going to make sure that he becomes the number 1 wide receiver on this team. And we haven't heard jack squat from Kenny Golladay in years. Those were in the first few seasons of his career. He can't control that. But it also says something if he has never, in his 7 seasons in the league, been able to break out of that role yet. So they've still got a lot to figure out there. The Eagles re-signed Dallas Goedert to a 1-year deal, which is definitely a good sign for them. The dangers that were coming about with potentially losing him could have been very interesting to navigate. Now, it's not a long-term deal, so they're still not committed to him for more than just this next season. And it still leaves them open to draft potentially another tight end, because they did also lose Kylen Granson from something else that I came across as I'm looking through all these names. You are going to be looking for someone who can at least back up Grant Calcaterra, or who can provide you with enough talent at that position to potentially overtake Dallas Goedert, depending on if he leaves next season. And that's why I've consistently been saying in my mock drafts that the Eagles could still get Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon. That is still a massive possibility. And other mock drafts have been saying it for a little bit of time. A short-term deal like that still puts it in play. It's really just about how they want to navigate things. The Panthers re-signed Nick Scott, the safety. Jalen Reeves-Maybin was re-elected as the NFLPA president. And the Commanders would re-sign Jeremy McNichols, which I also, there's too much going on. Now again, yes, Rachaad White coming back, teaming up with his former Arizona State running mate, and Jaden Daniels is all cool and everything. But you are now overcrowding this with running backs that still, they're just, Like, that's not really the standard you want to set. I just don't know. Mac Nichols is definitely a good receiving threat out of the backfield, but that is the responsibility that Rachaad White holds. And unless they're making Krosky Merritt their full-time, somewhat bell cow running back, or just running a by-committee system, I don't really know the roles that they're trying to have these guys fill out. It isn't clear to me right now. Like, there are so many question marks surrounding all of them and their limits as players. And granted, that's going to happen sometimes, especially if you want them to play off of one another. But to combine all of that in a single running back room is just very weird. It's very weird. We had a trade, as yesterday the Jets traded Justin Fields to the Chiefs in exchange for a 2027 6-rounder. It's just an admission that they botched everything, and they're really trying to clear things up for a true, smooth, I should say, transition into their potential quarterback of the future, especially if Dante Moore actually decides to commit to the 2027 draft. Like, I tell you, man, once that decision was made, everything changed for that mindset in the Jets organization. Blame Stephen A. Smith, I guess, for scaring him off. I don't know. But either way, with the general issues that have gone on at quarterback in that organization for years on end, this is just the latest addition to the overall trend. The fact that Christian Hackenberg didn't even play a single snap in the NFL. Fucking Bryce Petty, Josh McCown, Chris Streveler for a little bit, Joe Flacco, Sam Darnold in that tenure, just all succumbing to the terrible stench in that organization. Zach Wilson as well. And we now group Justin Fields into that. And Tyrod Taylor and Brady Cook. Dear goodness. This was a culmination of just truly bad play overall. And I love Justin Fields. You can't have a season like he did last year. You can't perform like that and expect the team to express true faith in you as a player for much longer than that. If you think it's a bad return, it's not that simple. The Jets knew what they were getting themselves into by paying him on a short-term deal that was worth $20 million per year for $40 million overall. It was seen as a low-risk, high-reward situation. Always for them. If he performed well and outperformed those expectations, well, the Jets had a younger quarterback that they could build around and not have to worry about acquiring one through means of the draft. And if he performed badly, then they could easily let him walk. It was an audition for him this year. And again, in that Steelers game to open, it started out as well as it could have possibly gone. In fact, when looking at every single thing that Jets team proceeded to do over the next 17 weeks, That was the best it got. That was by far the best it fucking got. Like, the box score watchers out there cannot be fooled by the completion percentage and the 7 touchdowns to an interception. Because the man Justin Fields, for whatever reason, I don't think I can fully chalk it up to play calling. I don't think I can fully chalk it up to a lack of separation, although that was something that played into it for the Jets, and considering that they lost Garrett Wilson. Okay, whatever. The man went entire games without even thinking about pushing the ball more than 5 yards down the fucking field. It was one of the most anemic displays of offense ever for a starting quarterback. And you were paying him $20 million for 1,259 yards in 9 games. There were games where he literally struggled to get to 100, let alone 200 passing yards. You couldn't hold on to him for much longer than that. So his value at that point, even if $20 million per year is probably going to, hike it up, well, the play on the field tempered all of that. And then some. The fact that they are getting anything back for Justin Fields in this situation is a miracle. It's a miracle that they did. You might not use that 6th round pick for much. There's a very low chance that you're going to find someone truly productive at that round. But it's something. Like, I guess we still have to see how Mahomes tracks in terms of preparation up to the start of the regular season, and figure out how healthy he is going to be by that point of time. Even if at the very least, let's say Mahomes misses 1 or 2 games. They still believe, and maybe they are right to, that Justin Fields is a much better option at quarterback for them than Chris Oladokun. Like, that is just a crazy statement to come out and say. Do you know how low the bar has to be set to say that you are maybe a slightly better option than Chris Oladokun? Man, that's a damn shame, bro. I genuinely have no words for something like that. And that's not even mentioning the other quarterback that Chiefs had playing, aside from Gardner Minshew, the second, before he got hurt as well, when those injuries started taking place. Like, let me just see that real quick, because I know I talked about it. It's just not coming to me right now. But their quarterback situation behind Patrick Mahomes, and, with him being one of the better players outright in the NFL, you're not always going to worry that much about backups. But it was weak. Very weak behind him. Oh yeah, Shane Bichelle. I searched it up. I searched up the team, and then it just came to me. Shane Bichelle. You are a slightly better option than those two guys. That is a low fucking standard to set. But it still gives Justin Fields somewhat of an opportunity to do something. And in all seriousness, I do believe that in certain specialist situations, his scrambling ability can prove useful. His ability to run the football can prove useful in those situations. Because, hell, we've heard about before that after the one time in 2019 they had Mahomes run a quarterback sneak, they decided to never run the ball in that manner with him again. You can have Justin Fields for that. Mahomes is obviously going to handle a lot of the improv responsibilities, especially on those third downs, those third and longs. He's going to carry that well. But if you truly need to conserve him for a play or two, you can have Justin Fields come in on specialized design runs to take the pressure off. And also create for a lethal combination at times if you're going to have him and Kenneth Walker III out there in the same formation. It's not to minimize Justin Fields' role in this team at all, but more than likely this could be reality for him, especially when Mahomes gets healthy again. And that could help if the Chiefs can effectively restore balance. In fact, it's the kind of system that they haven't had in years. Pretty much since the tail end of Jamal Charles' tenure with that organization, they have consistently been a pass-first team. Consistently. The earliest versions of the air raid offense, with Mahomes being there, have continued to linger throughout. And while the rushing game has been better in some years, they still primarily thrive on that approach. They try to dress it up through the different spread style systems and the RPO screens and everything like that, but they are still a pass-first team. And at least were at the time. So we'll see how that shifts. Darius Slay Jr. would retire from the NFL after 13 seasons. And he made that post yesterday via social media. I'm like, wow. It had been an awkward ending to his career if this is truly it. Because he rotated around all of 2025 and was never really able to truly find a home with any particular organization. For a player in Darius Slay Jr. who, at the very peak of his career, was flat out one of the better corners in the NFL. Definitely. That is an anticlimactic ending to have. But for what it's worth for Darius Slay Jr.'s career, he, in Detroit especially, was considered to be much greater, including a stretch in Detroit where he had 3 straight Pro Bowls and also an All-Pro first team selection in 2017 with a league-leading 8 interceptions and also 26 passes defense. That man was getting illusions to Darrelle Revis in some comparisons to him. With the fact that you literally could not throw the ball in his direction for a good few years on end. And that's on a Lions team that was still struggling to put out competent ball teams. And they still feared him enough to at least limit themselves. Now, they tried. And still, he had it within him to lead the league in both categories. That is true dominance at its finest. And it carried over into his Eagles tenure, where, he, with age, might have started to slip back in terms of ability to keep up with other wide receivers, but with transforming into more of a zone system and still being relied upon in certain situations, especially on crucial downs, to man up and lock up. He could do that for you still. It wasn't always pretty, but over his Eagles tenure, he had 9 interceptions with them, 2 pick sixes, a forced fumble, and 3 fumble recoveries, with 2 touchdowns, both in the 2021 season, leading all players in that category. He also had 272 tackles with them and 11 TFLs. Just an all-around weapon for them. And the most important part, he had mentioned earlier last offseason that this year would more than likely be his last. And it was something that was considered even after the Eagles had reached the mountaintop. He can look back and say that he wanted more, but at the same time, he was able to get a Super Bowl ring out of it all. And for some of the other players that have recently retired, especially those who have been accomplished in their own right, it's very difficult to reach that level of success. Only a small percentage can do it. Darius Slay Jr. can say that at the very least, he not only did it as a part of this 24-25 Eagles team, he was also a core piece of that team, and factored mightily in their ability to get it done, slotting down, sacrificing his role as an outside corner at times, and then also, if the situation called for it, moving back out there to allow both of Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell to shine in their rookie seasons and go on to automatically become a top 10 cornerback duo in the league in just their first couple seasons of work. Will we really talk about Pittsburgh? I don't know. But it doesn't matter. He already accomplished what he needed to in terms of getting a ring. I think, personally, that he is a player, even with being on those obscure Lions teams, for a good stretch of his career, all the way up until his age 28 season, I think that he is a player who will get into the Hall of Fame someday. I will not say that he's a first ballot guy, especially considering that in his own era, even though it is hard for a corner to get accomplishments of, awards like Defensive Player of the Year, with it traditionally going to defensive ends and edge rushers, maybe linebackers occasionally and things like that, you still had a guy like Stephon Gilmore lap him in terms of acquiring those and also being able to have more overall team success paired up with his own individual efforts. The fact that Gilmore in that same era could get a Defensive Player of the Year and also get himself multiple All-Pro selections along with making the Pro Bowl a little more, that's something that, again, at the same time that Darius Slay Jr. was reaching the peak of his powers, Gilmore had to level up on that even more. So you could take that a number of different ways. And I think both of them, as players, were dominant as corners in their own respective methods. But that would be interesting to explore if you are a person looking into that in saying like 2031 and beyond, if this is actually the last time he suits up on an NFL field. It's hey man, just truly a good vintage style player to look back on and just have appreciation for. I expect him also, and that could suggest a lot. But I would also have reason to believe that his name, his jersey number, in time, should be retired in the Lions Ring of Honor as well. I have reason to believe that wholeheartedly. Because the fact that he could still stand out on that defensive unit and on that team in that era of Lions football, even if they didn't have the success to match it, that's got to be worth something. And we know that Matthew Stafford inevitably is going to get his name hung up there. They aren't the same caliber of player, but they were your two most important players during that era. You gotta find a way. That's all I'm saying. And again, Eagles fans, regardless of how they want to approach players like him and James Bradbury IV, you can appreciate that he stuck around and provided you with your second championship in less than a full decade. So no matter what it looks like to you, he definitely left his own impact in multiple teams and franchises. The 49ers yesterday would sign Christian Kirk, and there have still been different rumors going around suggesting that, hey, Jauan Jennings could be on his way off the team and they could let him go. Now, if that does happen, this move makes a little more sense to me. I don't fully see it right now. But, that's not anything to just sleep on, I guess. Just, like, Christian Kirk is not that kind of receiver that will just blow you away at all. But he is a serviceable talent to have. If he has to be a guy that you rely upon like the Cardinals did, good luck. The 49ers in this situation, with them already having Evans and Pearsall, potentially making Christian Kirk another like tertiary option, that could actually be solid. It actually could be. But it depends on what they do with Jauan Jennings. I can't really speculate anything until there is word on whatever that may look like in the next few weeks. The Broncos traded 2026 first, third, and fourth round pick to the Dolphins in exchange for Jaylen Waddle on a 2026 fourth round pick earlier. And when I heard it, I was surprised that the Broncos could make something like that happen. This is quite the doozy, because it is something that I genuinely didn't expect to happen. I mean, there had been different reports suggesting that Jaylen Waddle could have been traded at the trade deadline, and I suppose that the deals at the time weren't good enough to warrant it. So they decided to move on, let him play through the rest of the season. And now they've decided to circle back, looking at this overall return from the Broncos that were being offered, and they couldn't pass this up. I'm not going to lie, very few people would pass up very few people would pass up that kind of exchange. 2026 first, third, and fourth round picks for a man in Jaylen Waddle who has never been greater than a number 2 on his own team. And again, that's not fully his fault. When you get a guy like Tyreek Hill in the offseason and have him proceed to, in his first year, put up more than 1,700 receiving yards by himself, it's going to be very hard for Jaylen Waddle to become the main wide receiver. But he'd been paid like a wide receiver 2 all this time. And for a while, it felt like as long as things were going smoothly in Miami on that front, they could afford to get away with it. Between the amount of injury suffered, between the underwhelming play after a while on their end, especially when we got into November, December, and the one January game that they had in the playoffs against the Chiefs. Nothing went as planned. Yes, Waddle himself was successful. They mentioned that in his first, 3 of his first 4 years, he had put up 1,000-yard seasons. And honestly, for a secondary wide receiver of any sort to find that kind of flow in that offense and carve that out, while understanding that you're going to get a few less targets, is pretty good. Yeah, his first 3 seasons burst onto the scene with over 1,000 yards in each of them, including a career high of 1,356 yards in 2022. He also had 104 receptions in his rookie season, which he has not surpassed since. I don't know. There's been a little bit of a struggle over the past few years. Again, trying to make sure that Tyreek Hill gets his touches and also understanding that Jaylen Waddle is explosive when he gets the ball in his hands. He's seen a little bit less of that attention, but he is still that caliber of player when he gets the ball. There's no questioning that. The Dolphins had to make a decision at some point. And you're thinking initially, when they make all those cuts, including that to Tyreek Hill, maybe they're thinking to themselves, oh, do we want to focus solely on Jaylen Waddle? Do we want to build this entire thing around him? This move would suggest that not quite. Not necessarily. It's their own doing. It's their own fault. Even if Jaylen Waddle was far less expensive than Tyreek Hill was going to be, they still had to commit so much money to the damn waiving stretch. And it made it difficult to really account for how much money Jaylen Waddle was going to be worth this season, upcoming. Looking at his contract, pull this up. Yeah, looking at his contract. Right, he had the 3-year, $84.75 million rookie extension. Coming up over the next couple of years, he was about to cost $23 million and then $25 million in base salary. When you're still dealing with this kind of wave and stretch money, you cannot possibly take that on. It would just be difficult to keep up with that. And for as good as he is, there are still questions surrounding him in his role on the team, being a slider wide receiver at 5'10", 185. Speed kills, yes. But, as he needed to take on a larger role and ultimately became the focal point once Tyreek Hill went out, well, hey, was he going to be able to truly keep up with that for a full stretch of time, or was he going to falter a little bit? And the answer to that could not really be made out. I mean, in all honesty, with getting more of the targets, that's going to help him out a ton. But the offense was just not really, it did not click for most of the season. And while, yes, he had a few games where he did proceed to, after the Tyreek Hill injury, put together some solid work, there was also a general struggle there. There were a few lowlights in this. The one reception, 15-yard game against Cleveland, where Tagovailoa, coincidentally, did not play well. The loss against the Steelers, 28-15, where he had just 2 receptions for 26 yards, where once again, Tua Tagovailoa did not play well. And then he was held catchless in this Bucs game, though he might have gotten hurt. So that could be taken in a number of different fashions. I won't harp too much on that point. Yeah, he hadn't really performed to the extent that they would have expected in a larger role, with him now being the number 1 receiver on the team. So that could caution them a little bit. And I guess with understanding that, knowing that you didn't really have a way to continue eating up that kind of money, they gave themselves no other choice but to move on from him. And it's unfortunate that you move on from a talent like that in this situation. He's only 27 years old, will be 28 on November 25th, right around Thanksgiving. That's tough. He'll definitely help out the Broncos. It is a great move for them to pick him up. Because to pair his explosive quality alongside Courtland Sutton's sure-handedness and possession tendencies, that just gives Bo Nix an entirely different dimension to work with. And I was questioning earlier a little bit, okay, what does this mean for a guy like Marvin Mims Jr., who, with having Jaylen Waddle also being a pretty good return specialist, could see his role diminish slightly, understanding that Jaylen Waddle is going to be far superior in that role. Well, I can still use him for the quick game. They love to feed Marvin Mims Jr. on those screen routes. And they'll probably look to get Waddle involved in that action too. But there's still room for him to grow on this team alongside Jaylen Waddle. And when they're on the field together, regardless of how small they can be, it opens up everything else, because you can't let those guys just run all the way down the field. Jaylen Waddle most certainly can, as one of the faster players in the league, generally speaking. He can't do it. And it gives you all the room underneath to allow a guy like Courtland Sutton, or even like Pat Bryant II, who came along in the latter half of the season. Those guys can do more of their damage in the intermediate and the short game if you need to give Bo Nix an easy outlet. And just like that, the dynamic of their passing game changes mightily, especially with Sean Payton removing himself from play calling duties. So this is going to be an interesting time of change for the entire team, period, on this offensive side. I think it's Davis Webb handling those responsibilities now, so it is going to be interesting to see just how creative they get. I will say that there is a way to view this to where, I guess you approach it from the standpoint of, I can't say that neither team wins totally, because they both did exactly what they needed to do in regards to their situations. Yes, you lose a tremendous piece in Jalen Waddle, but you also get back 3 picks in this draft, and not trying to delay anything over to 2027 or 2028. You will get them back for this draft to add to a deep pool of draft capital. And that's smart from the Dolphins' perspective. If you're the Broncos, it's a lot. It is a lot. And I'm seeing it and I'm like, it's a lot. But this is the same Broncos team that literally made it to the conference championship and fields one of the best defenses in the league. They don't need to work with too many draft picks here. And a first round pick especially could be considered crazy. But at the same time, when you're in that kind of state, you are willing to do anything that you need to in order to get your hands on a talent like that. And they decided to pull the trigger. Only time will tell if it pays off for them, and I think it will. But for the Dolphins in this situation, now you add to it. Because now you are looking for pretty much everything. You need to draft another edge rusher potentially who can work alongside Chop Robinson. You need to build up that back end with some safeties, with some corners, whatever the fuck you got to do. You need it badly. You will need a bona fide wide receiver. And with their first round pick being in the latter half of the first round, because the Broncos had like pick number 30. So again, to them, it's not going to be worth that much. But to the Dolphins, it is everything. It means that you double up, and they had the number 11 overall pick in the draft. So at least one of those core responsibilities, top wide receiver in the draft, like a Jordan Tyson or a Carnell Tate, if they even fall down that far. Because now there have been rumors that the Browns can go get a guy like Jordan Tyson or Carnell Tate. Like, there are... Even a Denzel Boston might seem like a reach at that, but you could also go and pick up Denzel Boston at number 30. There are different ways to go about handling these responsibilities. You could still draft an edge rusher. You could still draft a corner like Monsieur Delan, although I think that he would be off the board by that point and go to the Saints. Maybe Jermont McCoy, Colton Hood. You have options if you're the Dolphins. And to add more picks to the palette, there are a number of things that you could do with that. And all works to where exactly they are headed. There is an understanding that you are probably not going to compete too much this season, especially with clearing out all those players, and especially with being in the first stretch of paying Tua Tagovailoa that shit ton of money. If they are just conforming to the idea that they're just trying to, have a standard season, not really project to compete for anything or contend for anything, but set things up moving forward, it's a major first step to take. Even if it means that, hey, they aren't going to do too well this season. And that's okay with them. With the amount of players and the talent of the players that they have let go. Understanding that the Tua Tagovailoa stretch is done completely. And they have to now find a way to transition into a new era of Dolphins football in the cleanest way imaginable. This has to be a slow grind. Because they cannot go out and spend all this money. They don't have the ability to do it with that kind of capital already on their books and taking up a large chunk of their existing cap space. This is going to be a waiting out process. And hell, hey, the Dolphins have a lot of interesting decisions coming. Yo, I ain't gonna lie. Just get ready. They could very well be bad this season. And outside of a Jordan Tyson, there is one man currently still in college football who is projected to be an even better wide receiver than Jordan Tyson was. Everything has been stating that the best non-draft eligible wide receiver in the nation in college football was Jeremiah Smith. And you can only imagine where Jeremiah Smith will be projected in terms of draft selection in 2027. The Dolphins would have an opportunity then to do the most optimal thing imaginable and get their hands on the hometown kid, Florida-born himself. I'm just saying. The Eagles signed Hollywood Brown to a 1-year contract. What is it with them consistently getting these skinny wide receivers? You have Devontae Smith being a taller number 2, but he is slight in frame. Still handles his business on the outside. That's nothing for him. But it's just between that and now having a man in Marquise Brown who's going to handle more of the slot responsibility. Yeah, it's an upgrade from Jahan Dotson, and he's definitely a faster player. But I don't really understand the vision there. If you can get some greater production from Marquise Brown, that's great. It's tough to really look at right now. I mean, they still have this A.J. Brown decision looming over their head. And for all we know, this could just be a complete nothing burger. He can come back to the Eagles and rejoin them like nothing ever happened. But until that does occur, or something else maybe, it's difficult to see any wide receiver move working out for them right now. It's smart to upgrade that tertiary position on the field, though. It is. And again, it says a lot because Marquise Brown has had these issues. You are hoping that Marquise Brown remains healthy and available to perform on the field. That's really what this boils down to. And then, for what looks to be the final piece of news just coming in, the Texans signed Wyatt Teller to a 2-year deal. Smart for them to get another guard to flank Ed Ingram, who, with Wyatt Teller, he's a bit older himself, but he's clearly a good talent at that position. And, even if that is the case, you gotta pay if you want to get a great upgrade at that spot. And if they had to do so for Wyatt Teller, so fucking be it. If the Browns were having interior issues with their offensive line, it wasn't because of him, surely. And now you fortify either side, I suppose. He would be playing. It really depends on where they enlist Ed Ingram out there, on the right side or the left side. And if he can play either or, the Texans will be more than willing to take that on. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.